We live in an era that has fundamentally confused the volume of a man's voice with the weight of his character, a society that routinely rewards the loudest, most boastful, and most aggressively insecure individuals, mistaking their desperate need for attention as a display of absolute dominance. But this illusion is nothing new, and over 2,000 years ago, the Greek philosopher Plato provided the ultimate psychological framework for dismantling this modern epidemic of fake arrogance and revealing the quiet, unshakable bedrock of true confidence. To understand the profound difference between the man who pretends to be powerful and the man who actually is, we must travel back to ancient Athens, a city teeming with politicians, debaters, and influencers known as the Sophists. Men who were absolute masters of rhetoric, who dressed loudly, spoke grandly, and could argue any point simply to win the immediate applause of the gathered crowd. Yet Plato saw right through them, recognizing that their entire existence was a carefully constructed performance designed to mask a deep, hollow emptiness inside their own souls. The sophist is the ultimate archetype of the modern arrogant man, the fake alpha who constantly needs to broadcast his success, his toughness, and his superiority to everyone in the room. Because his identity is entirely dependent on external validation, meaning that if the crowd stops clapping, if the followers disappear, and if the room stops paying attention to him, his sense of self completely collapses. This is the tragic paradox of arrogance. It looks like an excess of self-esteem, but psychologically, it is the exact opposite. It is a profound deficit of self-worth, wrapped in a protective armor of manufactured superiority, a preemptive strike against the world to ensure no one discovers how incredibly fragile the man underneath truly is. True confidence, as Plato understood it through the teachings of his mentor Socrates, is not the belief that you are better than everyone else, but the absolute grounding realization that you do not need to be better than anyone else to validate your own existence. This is where the concept of Socratic ignorance becomes the ultimate weapon of psychological dominance. Because when Socrates famously declared that he knew nothing, he was not expressing weakness. He was demonstrating a level of internal security that was completely immune to humiliation. The arrogant man is perpetually terrified of being proven wrong, terrified of looking foolish, and terrified of not having the answer, which forces him to constantly posture, lie, and defend his fragile ego against any perceived slight or minor criticism, making him incredibly easy to manipulate because all you have to do to control an arrogant man is threaten his ego or deny him his applause. The truly confident man, however, is impossible to manipulate precisely because he has already accepted his own flaws, his own lack of knowledge, and his own mortality, meaning there is nothing you can expose about him that he is not already exposed to himself, granting him a quiet, heavy aura that deeply unsettles people who are used to interacting with fragile egos. Plato illustrated this dynamic perfectly in his allegory of the cave, where prisoners are chained in the dark, watching shadows on a wall, competing with each other to see who can best predict the movements of the shadows, awarding each other honors, titles, and prestige based on this entirely meaningless game. The arrogant man is simply the loudest, most aggressive prisoner in the cave. He wants everyone to know he is the undisputed champion of the meaningless shadows. He wants the biggest trophy, and he is willing to tear others down to protect his imaginary status in a completely fake world. But true confidence belongs to the man who has broken his chains, turned around, and walked out of the cave into the blinding light of the sun, into the realm of actual reality and objective truth. And when this man returns to the cave, he no longer cares about the shadow games, he no longer needs the applause of the other prisoners, and he does not bother to argue with the arrogant man who claims to be the king of the dark. When you build true confidence, you experience this exact psychological shift. You stop competing in the petty, invisible hierarchies that consume the minds of average men. You stop feeling the desperate need to win every trivial argument. You stop caring if someone accidentally misunderstands you, and you stop broadcasting your achievements. Because you have seen the sun, you know what is real, and the desperate posturing of the people around you suddenly looks exhausting and slightly pathetic. This realization completely changes your physical presence in any given room. Fake arrogance is always incredibly tense, vibrating with the constant need to prove itself. Standing too wide, talking too loud, interrupting others, and constantly scanning the room to see who is watching. A physiological state of fight or flight driven entirely by the constant fear of being exposed as a fraud. True confidence, on the other hand, is physically relaxed, breathing deeply from the diaphragm, making steady, unforced eye contact, speaking in a calm, measured tone, and moving with the slow, deliberate grace of a man who knows that he owns his immediate space and does not need to encroach on anyone else's to feel powerful. Plato described the human soul as a chariot pulled by two horses, one being a white horse representing noble spirit, righteous indignation, and discipline, while the other is a dark horse representing wild, irrational appetites, lust, and uncontrollable ego, with the charioteer representing reason, the ruling faculty of the rational mind. The arrogant man has dropped the reins and allowed the dark horse of his ego to drag him wherever it pleases, leaving him completely at the mercy of his own insecurities. Reacting violently to every insult, constantly chasing the next hit of external validation, and completely losing control over his internal state. The confident man is the master charioteer. He has not killed his horses, he has not suppressed his ambition or his masculine drive, but he has brought them under the absolute control of his reason, meaning his emotions work for him, not against him, and when someone disrespects him, his ego does not flare up and demand immediate, loud retaliation, because his reason understands that the disrespect of a fool is not a threat to the reality of the sun. This is why the truly confident man never seems to be trying hard. A concept the Greeks called sophrosyne, which translates to soundness of mind, temperance, and a deep, harmonious self-control that naturally radiates outward and commands respect without ever having to demand it. When you operate from a place of sophrosyne, you become a psychological mirror to everyone you interact with, because your lack of a reactive ego forces the arrogant man to face his own noise, his own chaos, and his own emptiness, which is why your mere silence can shatter the confidence of a loudmouth faster than any insult you could ever throw at him. People are biologically programmed to detect authenticity, and while fake arrogance might intimidate the weak and impress the foolish in the short term, over a long enough timeline, the cracks always show, the mask always slips, and the arrogant man inevitably isolates himself because people intuitively realize that he is an energetic vampire, sucking the validation out of the room to feed a bottomless pit of insecurity. True confidence is incredibly generous. Because the confident man is internally full, he does not need to diminish others to elevate himself. He can celebrate the success of his peers without feeling threatened. He can listen to an opposing viewpoint without feeling personally attacked. He can admit when he is wrong with a genuine smile, a level of psychological freedom that the arrogant man will never, ever experience. To transition from the exhausting performance of arrogance into the unshakable reality of true confidence, you must undergo a brutal process of internal auditing, which requires you to sit alone in silence and ruthlessly interrogate your own motives. Asking yourself why you dress the way you do, why you speak the way you do, why you feel the need to win certain arguments, and whether your actions are driven by a genuine pursuit of excellence or a desperate fear of inadequacy. Plato taught that all true knowledge is a form of remembering, a concept known as anamnesis, which is a process of stripping away the false beliefs and societal conditioning. We have accumulated to uncover the pure truth that already exists within us, and building confidence works exactly the same way. It is not about adding new, aggressive traits to your personality. It is about stripping away the ego-driven defense mechanisms that are blocking your natural, grounded power. You must stop outsourcing your self-worth to the opinions of the mob, recognizing that the mob is fickle, irrational, and primarily composed of people who do not even know who they are themselves, making it absolute madness to let them dictate who you should be. When you base your identity on your own internal metrics, such as your integrity, your work ethic, your ability to stay calm under pressure, and your commitment to the truth, you become bulletproof, because no one can take those things away from you. No market crash can devalue them, and no social algorithm can cancel them. This is the ultimate essence of the philosopher king, Plato's ideal ruler, a man who does not seek power for the sake of ego, but who is entrusted with power because he is the only one who does not desperately need it. a man who has mastered himself so completely that he can be trusted to lead others, without turning them into props for his own vanity. In your own life, you must become the philosopher king of your own mind, ruling over your impulses with a steady hand, refusing to be provoked by the shadows on the wall, and treating every challenge not as a threat to your ego, but as an opportunity to test the strength of your chariot. When you walk into a room, do not try to dominate it with noise. Do not try to prove that you are the smartest or the toughest man there, but instead, enter with the quiet, observant stillness of a man who is completely comfortable in his own skin, letting the arrogant men exhaust themselves with their posturing while you watch, assess, and reserve your energy for things that actually matter. Notice how people naturally gravitate toward the quiet center of gravity in a room, how they instinctively defer to the man who does not seem to need their approval, and how they project authority onto the person who is comfortable in the silence, which is the ultimate proof that true confidence is not a performance you put on for the world, but a state of being that the world inevitably recognizes and respects, a frequency of existence that cuts through the noise of fake arrogance like a blade through water. The transition requires pain, because the ego hates to be starved, and when you first stop defending yourself against minor criticisms, when you first bite your tongue instead of dropping a clever insult, your ego will scream that you are being weak, that you are losing status, that you are letting people walk all over you. But you must realize this is just the dark horse throwing a tantrum because it is no longer in control. If you hold the reins steady, if you breathe through the discomfort and maintain your alignment with reality, the ego will eventually submit. The noise in your head will fade, and you will be left with a profound, terrifying, and beautiful silence, a psychological spaciousness where fear used to live. From this place of silence, your actions will carry a weight that words can never convey. Your decisions will be final, your presence will be magnetic, and you will finally understand what Plato meant when he looked past the loud, boastful sophists and saw that the greatest power a man can achieve is not the subjugation of the world, but the quiet, absolute, and unbreakable mastery of himself. The psychological architecture of the arrogant man is built entirely on a foundation of comparison. A relentless, exhausting mental treadmill where he must constantly evaluate his position relative to everyone else in his vicinity, asking himself if he is taller, richer, smarter, or more successful than the man standing next to him. And if he perceives that he is not, his internal alarm bells ring, flooding his system with cortisol, triggering an immediate, desperate need to reassert his dominance through subtle put-downs, exaggerated storytelling, or aggressive posturing. This comparative mindset is the exact psychological mechanism that keeps the prisoners in Plato's cave chained to the wall. They cannot look away from the shadows because the shadows are the only metric by which they can measure their own worth. Completely blind to the fact that the entire game is an illusion. The truly confident man has stepped off this treadmill entirely. He does not measure his worth by looking at the men around him. He measures his worth by looking at the man he was yesterday, engaging in a private, lifelong competition with his own potential rather than a public, desperate scramble for social status. Because his metric for success is entirely internal, he is completely immune to the toxic envy that destroys so many arrogant men. When the confident man sees another man achieving greatness, his first instinct is not resentment, but curiosity, recognizing that excellence in others is not a threat to his own value, but rather an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to refine his own pursuit of the good. This is a profound psychological pivot, transitioning from a scarcity mindset, where respect and power are seen as finite resources that must be hoarded and stolen from others, to an abundance mindset, where true power is understood to be generated from within and multiplied through genuine connection and shared excellence. When you interact with an arrogant man, you can physically feel this scarcity. Every conversation is a zero-sum game. Every interaction is a battle for the upper hand. And every compliment is heavily qualified or laced with passive aggression, making it absolutely exhausting to be in his presence for any extended period. Conversely, being in the presence of a truly confident man is physically relaxing because he does not require you to shrink so that he can feel large. He gives you the psychological space to be exactly who you are, secure in the knowledge that your light does not diminish his sun. This generously expanded psychological space is the true hallmark of Socratic dialogue. Socrates did not engage in debate to crush his opponents, humiliate them, or prove his own intellectual superiority, as the sophists did. But rather he asked questions to guide his conversational partners toward their own realization of the truth, treating the interaction as a collaborative journey out of the cave rather than a gladiatorial combat in the dark. To embody this, you must train yourself to listen not with the intention of replying, contradicting, or one-upping, but with the intention of understanding, allowing there to be pauses in the conversation, resisting the urge to jump in with your own accomplishments the moment someone else shares theirs, and becoming comfortable with letting other people have the spotlight. The arrogant man believes that if he is not in the spotlight, he ceases to exist, but the confident man knows that the spotlight is just another shadow on the wall. And he is perfectly content to sit in the audience, observing the mechanics of theater, knowing that his reality remains unchanged, whether the crowd is cheering for him or completely ignoring him. This level of detachment is not apathy. It is the highest form of engagement because it allows you to interact with the world without being enslaved by it, to care deeply about your work, your family, and your principles without being emotionally destroyed if the world fails to recognize your efforts. The Stoic philosophers, who were heavily influenced by Plato, took this concept even further, teaching that we must draw a hard, impenetrable line between the things we can control and the things we cannot, recognizing that our reputation, our status, and the opinions of others fall squarely into the category of things we cannot control, making it absolute madness to tie our emotional well-being to them. The arrogant man has completely blurred this line, believing that through enough force, manipulation, and loud posturing, he can control how everyone perceives him, leading to a life of constant anxiety, paranoia, and micromanagement, as he desperately tries to plug every leak in his carefully constructed public image. When someone insults an arrogant man, they are poking a hole in his illusion, threatening the delicate fiction that holds his psyche together, which is why his reaction is always disproportionate, explosive, and aggressively defensive. When someone insults a confident man, they are simply offering an opinion about a shadow on the wall. If the insult contains a grain of truth, the confident man examines it, integrates the lesson, and improves himself, and if the insult is completely baseless, he discards it without a second thought, completely unbothered by the fact that someone in the dark has misunderstood the nature of the sun. You must internalize the realization that an insult only has the power to harm you if you agree with it on some level, meaning that a disproportionate reaction to disrespect is always a confession of your own insecurity, a loud broadcast to the world that the attacker has hit a nerve. When you respond to disrespect with complete, unbothered silence, you are not being passive. You are asserting the ultimate frame control, communicating without words that the attacker's opinion has zero jurisdiction in your psychological reality. A move that completely short-circuits the arrogant man's operating system, because he expects and desperately needs a reaction to validate his own power. This is the mastery of the charioteer pulling back on the reins of the dark horse, feeling the surge of adrenaline, feeling the biological urge to lash out, but consciously choosing to breathe, to pause, and to let the moment pass, recognizing that true power is not the ability to destroy your enemies, but the ability to remain completely unaffected by them. The modern world provides endless opportunities to practice this restraint, from the anonymous provocations of social media to the petty office politics of the corporate workplace, all of which are perfectly designed to bait your ego into the arena of the shadows, testing your resolve and attempting to drag you back into the cave. Every time you refuse to take the bait, every time you choose to remain silent when you could have argued, every time you let someone else take the credit without feeling slighted, you are strengthening the neural pathways of true confidence, rewiring your brain to stop craving the cheap dopamine of external validation, and start running on the deep, sustained energy of internal self-respect. This rewiring process alters your neurochemistry, lowering your baseline cortisol levels, increasing your serotonin, and creating a physiological state of calm readiness that people intuitively associate with highly competent, dangerous men. Men who do not need to bare their teeth because everyone already knows they are capable of biting. The fake alpha behaves like a small dog, barking at every passing shadow, aggressively protecting his tiny territory because he is fundamentally terrified of the world. While the true alpha behaves like a lion, resting calmly in the grass, ignoring the noise of the lesser animals, reserving his energy only for actions that are absolutely necessary. To become this lion, to become the philosopher king, you must embrace the concept of doing the work in the dark. Committing to the rigorous, unseen discipline of self-improvement, physical training, intellectual study, and emotional regulation without ever posting about it, bragging about it, or seeking a pat on the back for simply doing what required of a man. The arrogant man uses his goals as a tool for attention, talking endlessly about what he is going to build, who he is going to become, and how much money he is going to make, feeding his ego with the premature validation of his audience, which tragically drains his motivation to actually execute the work, because his brain has already received the chemical reward just by talking about it. The confident man moves in absolute silence, understanding that his ambitions are fragile until they are manifested in reality, protecting his goals from the corrupting influence of public opinion and allowing his results to make all the noise, recognizing that a monument built of solid stone does not need a billboard to announce its presence. When you adopt this mindset, you begin to experience a profound sense of psychological liberation, realizing that you no longer have to perform for anyone. You no longer have to keep your guard up, and you no longer have to remember which version of yourself you presented to which group of people, because you are exactly the same man in private as you are in public. This congruence between your internal reality and your external presentation is the ultimate definition of integrity, and it is the only foundation upon which true, lasting confidence can be built. When your thoughts, your words, and your actions are all in perfect alignment, your energy becomes concentrated like a laser, capable of cutting through the chaotic, scattered energy of the arrogant men who are constantly fracturing their identities to please the crowd. Plato understood that a society ruled by sophists, a society ruled by men who prioritize appearance over reality, rhetoric over truth, and arrogance over wisdom, is a society destined for collapse. Because the shadows on the wall provide no nourishment, no structure, and no defense against the harsh realities of the actual world. We see this collapse happening around us today as the cult of fake confidence produces a generation of men who are incredibly loud on the internet but completely paralyzed by anxiety in the real world. Men who possess the vocabulary of dominance but lack the psychological fortitude to withstand even the slightest adversity. You must refuse to participate in this cultural decay. You must reject the temptation of the quick fix, the easy applause, and the fake persona, choosing instead the steep, difficult, and lonely path out of the cave, committing yourself to the lifelong pursuit of the good, the true, and the beautiful, regardless of whether anyone else ever notices or appreciates your effort. This is the burden and the privilege of the awakened man. To live in a world obsessed with shadows, yet to organize his life entirely around the light of the sun, accepting that he will often be misunderstood, marginalized, and mocked by those who are still chained in the dark, yet remaining completely undisturbed by their judgment. When you finally reach this state of being, you will look back at your former arrogant self, not with hatred or embarrassment, but with a quiet, gentle compassion, recognizing that your desperate need to be seen was simply a manifestation of your profound fear of being invisible, a fear that has now been entirely eradicated by the overwhelming presence of your own internal light. You will realize that true confidence was never about conquering the room, dominating the conversation, or forcing the world to acknowledge your greatness. It was always about conquering yourself, mastering your own chariot, and stepping into the quiet, absolute certainty that your existence is inherently valuable, regardless of the role you play in the theater of the absurd. This is the legacy of Plato, the gift of Socrates, and the ultimate blueprint for psychological dominance, a life lived not in the frantic, exhausting pursuit of external power, but in the serene, unshakable possession of internal truth. A truth that makes you dangerous to tyrants, immune to manipulators, and absolutely free in a world of willing slaves. So drop the mask, let go of the noise, breathe into the silence, and take your rightful place in the sun.